I won't ask for a show of hands because I know it makes people a little nervous, but I suspect, based off of what I've seen in the news, that there are several people here. You can take all of that. Sorry, I just want to make sure my stuff was. I suspect somebody here, a couple people here, made a few donations to the Kentucky Education Commission this week and received a Powerball ticket in exchange for those donations that you made. That's my guess. If it was kind of a nice break in the news, if nothing else, because you had what, $1.4 billion on Wednesday? Holy smokes! And then we got to $1.8 billion on last night, Saturday. That's a lot of money. I got in this rabbit hole. I was like, let's think about the lottery a little bit. So I started spending some time looking the lottery. Like, what is the average jackpot on Powerball? And apparently, according to Wikipedia, it's $141 million. That's a lot of money. But that doesn't make the news. And people don't rush out for that, which made me think, like, what's going through our minds? You're sitting at home and you're like, it's $141 million, but then they're going to take some money for taxes out. You probably barely get $100 million. And what can you do with that? Can't do anything with $100 million. Isn't what it used to be. That used to be real money, but now it's not worth getting up off the couch to go into town. But $1.8 billion, that's worth the drive. That's worth the gas. Might as well show up for that one. I thought about the people who have unclaimed lottery tickets. Largest one, again, I think this is, was a news site somewhere, I think $80 million in Florida. Unclaimed, went back into the jackpot. And I thought about that. I thought, I kind of like that story because, every person in Florida that bought a ticket and it fell into the junk hole of their car, they found it 10 years later. Everybody was like, yeah, that was my ticket. I know it was. Everybody that lost their ticket was like, I bet I had the winner. And, that kind of leaves you a little bit of hope. It reminded me of Glenn and Gloria Sims, the story back in 2001. They had done their taxes with a little company called H&R Block. And while they were getting their taxes done, they were entered into the H&R Block $1 million sweepstakes. And anybody that did their taxes with them got entered into this thing. And the thing is that the Sims won. They won the $1 million. And so H&R Block reached out to them. They sent him an email, said, congratulations, you are the winner of $1 million. And Glenn deleted the email and he said, spammers. And they sent him another email and he deleted that one. And then they started a call. Hey, Mr. Sims, H&R Block here. Good news, you won $1 million. And he hangs up the phone on them because these are just the telemarketers, right? And they call again, and they call some more. They start to send letters, certified mail. All of this stuff is coming to their house, and they're like, this is ridiculous. Leave us alone. This ends up making the news. H&R Block goes on the news and says, hey, listen, we've had this prize, it's out there, these people refuse to claim it, and it's about to expire. It was 3 days away from the prize expiring. If they didn't claim it, they didn't get it. And Glenn saw this on the news, and he thought, man, maybe I better call. And so he calls them, and he says, hey, I'm Glenn Sims. I'm hearing you've got something that's happening. And they're like, yes, we want to give you $1 million. And he accepted it one day before the deadline was set to pass. Now, you think about that. You think about all of these calls, all of these emails, all of the mail, and all of that stuff coming to them. And they just kept ignoring it, thinking they were out to get them. What they really wanted to do was, I guess we could say the word bless them. They wanted to give them something good. In the book of Jonah, which we're starting today, it's going to go through the whole month, we're going to see that God is relentless in his pursuit of bringing goodness to Jonah. And yet today, as we saw, he starts this and he says, hey, Jonah, I've got a call for you. And Jonah runs away. Now, we focus a lot on the great wickedness of the city of Nineveh, but let's look at the verse here. It says, the call of the Lord came to Jonah, son of Amittai, saying, go at once to Nineveh. What's the word here? That great city. That great city. Here's maybe what we've not thought about. I don't want to ruin the story for you, but Jonah, he gets spit back out of the whale, and then he's going to go to Nineveh. It's a whole thing. But if you go to the end of this book, you will see that Jonah has an incredible prophetic ministry in the city of Nineveh. That while he is there, he has the largest audience he's ever had before. So he's been preaching, small stuff in the Judea area. He's been preaching there, but now God is calling him. He says, listen, I want you to go to this great city. This is the largest group of people he's probably ever preached to. Not only do I want you to go there, but I'm going to send you the most responsive audience that you've ever preached to. Jonah, you're going to preach to this whole city, and they are all going to repent. They're all going to respond to your message. The largest audience, the most responsive audience, I would say even the most influential audience. This is going to be the biggest gig of, Jonah's prophetic career. And what does he do? He runs away from it. But I guess what I want us to understand at this outset here is that God is calling Jonah to his best. Because that's what God does. God calls us to our best. A lot of people have a sadistic sort of view of God, that you talk to people about, like, how did you know God was calling you to this? Well, because it was difficult and I didn't want to do it and it was painful. That's how you know. That sounds maybe like that's not a good fit, actually, but that's how some people think of God. They're like, if God's calling me to something, it must be miserable. That's why God's calling me to it. But that's not the case. God calls us to our best. God isn't like bran flakes, where we know they're sort of good for us. They're just not real exciting. Nobody ever for their last meal said, you know what, I'd like to die with a stomach full of bran flakes. We kind of view God that way. He's probably good for us, but, it's not real exciting. That's not what we really want. But that's missing the point. God is calling Jonah, as he calls all of us, to our best. But Jonah, he's content, I guess, to play for local small audiences. God has said, hey, listen, I got a theater on Broadway for you, man. One-man show. And Jonah says, no, I got a place in Branson, Missouri I like just fine. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll just stay here. And that's what he does. Well, actually, it's not what he does. He runs away, right? So the text, it says, Jonah set out to flee to Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. So he went down to Joppa, that's the port, found a ship going to Tarshish, and he paid his fare and went on board to go away from the presence of the Lord. In some ways it starts well. Jonah gets up to go. He just goes the wrong direction. I know you all know all of this, but let me tell you anyway. So Nineveh is east of Joppa in what is present-day Iraq, and Tarshish was the farthest known western point at this point in time. Most people believe it was in southern Spain somewhere, and during the time of King Solomon, when merchants would travel to Tarshish, it would be a 3-year round trip. So, you really couldn't go further away than what Jonah is choosing to do. In some ways, maybe it's almost a metaphor, right? The same way we would say, I was out in the middle of Timbuktu. This is what Jonah is doing. He's saying, I'm going to go as far away as I can. Jonah's running from the call of God. But he's not alone, right? We often run from the call of God. Part of the problem is we don't always like the way that God calls to us. Yes, God calls to everybody in different ways and at different times and different seasons of life. Proverbs says that, wisdom cries aloud. So to the confused, God comes and he speaks a word of wisdom and knowledge. To the hurting, he calls with comfort. Jesus says, blessed are you who mourn. To those who are lonely, he says, I will be your God and you will be my people. To the complacent, though, he says, wake up, get with it. And to the stubborn and rebellious, he calls with a challenge. We would love it if God always spoke to us in a nice, gentle, Mr. Rogers-y tone. It's the voices, but that's not the case. God sometimes has to do something to get our attention and snap us out of complacency. So for a little while, I had a gig where I was teaching, adjunct teaching, like intro to the New Testament, intro to comparative religion, doing that kind of stuff. It was fun. It was community college type of deal, and I was with a group of other adjunct faculty, and we were talking about how do you get your students to engage in the first, few weeks. And they were all said, we do these fun things, and we do this, and we try to get people, and he said, how's that working for you? Not working real well. And it came around to my turn. What do you do to get the students engaged in the first few weeks? I said, well, I try to make sure they've all got a 0 by the end of week 1. That's my goal. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I want them to look at their grade and know that they're failing my class. I have found that really motivates them. They said, what do you mean? How do you do that? I said, well, it's real simple. I assign about 3 things that first week that come on fast, come on quick. And as soon as the deadline hits, I put a 0 in the grade book. And then all of a sudden, the next time we get to class, they're like, hey. I'm failing your class right now, and my grandma died, and grandmas are always dying, and I had this thing, we really had to do the work, that was really due, and I'm like, yeah, I was really due, and it's really not in, and so now you've really got a 0, and they're like, well, what am I going to do? How am I going to make it? How's this going to work? And I'll say, listen, if you just do the rest of your work, it'll all take care of itself, because this is a small grade. And in fact, I'm such a nice guy, I'll even drop the lowest one, and you can't get any lower than 0. So this is probably the one we'll drop if you pay attention and get with the program. And guess what? That worked. It worked real well. They got real motivated, and they started to pay attention. You know what? I did have a few semesters where grandma died and this, that, and I had work, this, that, and the other. I'd be like, all right, I'll give you an extra day or 2. And you know what happened? The rest of that whole semester, I had to give everybody an extra day or 2 or 3 or 4. But you start strong, and everybody realizes this is how it's got to go. Sometimes God's that way with us, right? We want this exception, we want a little bit of gentleness, and God says, listen, let's just live in reality. You got to get with the program. Jonah here has become too comfortable with God. He's become too comfortable with his prophetic position. He is just a little on the complacent side. And God is inviting Jonah into a new adventure. There's hundreds of prophets running around at this point in time, but God chooses Jonah because he knows that he needs Nineveh as much as Nineveh needs him. But Jonah runs away. Now, we might not get on a boat and run away, but we run away in other ways, don't we? We make excuses for ourselves and why we don't have to do some things, or maybe why the rules don't apply to us. Kindness, fairness, gentleness, love, self-control. These are good virtues for others, but they don't maybe apply to me because of this particular situation that we've got. It's strange, but we live in a world that seems to give a pass to people who succeed. A little bit of wealth, a little bit of fame, a little bit of success. It almost earns you an exemption or a pass to the rules. We're back in football season. A lot of college ball happened yesterday. And it's interesting to watch. You can see this dynamic where you get a little bit of success and it plays out. You get the star quarterback, and he's there, and he throws a terrible throw. He comes off the field and he takes his helmet and he throws it into the water stand, and all the cups go everywhere, and it's a mess. Or he tosses the tablets or whatever they're using, and what happens? Everybody will come around side and pick things up and clean it up and put it back and do it's all better at this point in time. But imagine if the third string lineman that nobody's heard of his name comes off the field and throws his helmet into this giant stand of water. What's going to happen? The coach is going to come by and say, you can't get around with this kind of behavior. That's not going to work here. You better straighten up your act or you're going to be off this team. What's the difference? It's success. A little bit of success, a little bit of fame, a little bit of fortune gives you a pass at the rules in the world that we live in. You see, here's the thing, is we've confused greatness with goodness. And greatness alone isn't what God is calling us to, because greatness is not our best. In fact, our best, it starts with goodness. Yes, God is calling Jonah to a pretty big act of greatness, But his biggest concern is that there's goodness inside of Jonah. Today we live in hot pursuit of greatness. We want to be great rather than good. We argue about who is the GOAT, and goodness seems like a consolation prize. But if you look at how God describes his own work, you'll see that maybe we've missed something. Genesis chapter 1, verse 4, God in his great creative act creates light and darkness, and God saw that the light was good. The light was good. It sort of feels insulting to say to somebody, man, that was good. You did a good job. To come into the Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's up there hanging upside down, painting, and you say, good, that's good, Michelangelo, that's good. You did a good job. It feels sort of patronizing. What's the difference? Erwin McManus, I like this quote. He says this, great is about execution and achievement. Good is about essence and ethos. So, yes, God is the creator of all. Of course, he's capable of creating great things, but the question is it also good? You might be able to make a masterpiece, invent a new process, revolutionize your industry, or create something truly, greatly beautiful, but the question remains, is it good? See, Jonah has been in this place where his name has become great. He's achieved a level of notoriety among his people, but he has lost the core of goodness inside of him. I think the paradox of being good and great was highlighted especially with the creation of the atomic bomb. We would say, yes, that was a great invention. I think philosophers are still wondering if it's good. Friends, you might be really great at what you do, but it's goodness that helps you sleep at night, to look your loved ones in the eyes, to face yourself in the mirror. Jonah's probably really great at what he does. He can draw a crowd, but he's forgotten that his job is to take the message of God's goodness to other people. What God is really calling Jonah to in this is to recover that. To recover goodness. And that's what this book is going to be about. And as we chase through, we're going to find at the very end, we're just kind of left hanging. What is Jonah going to do when God finally gets a hold of him? And that's the question we've all got to answer for ourselves. What are we going to do when God finally gets a hold of us? Whether he sends a friend, a trial, something to get our attention, a storm, a giant fish. I mean, God works in mysterious ways. But when he finally gets a hold of us, how are we going to respond? Let me tell you, I think the good news is this, is that God never gives up on us. He's constantly chasing after us. He's constantly calling us to our best. Today we've got the ministry fair. These are all community ministry partners of the church. And as you leave, you'll also get one of these snazzy little brochures. And inside of there are all of the ministries that are happening here in the church and opportunities to serve. And it's interesting that God sometimes calls to us through the voice of somebody else, through Scripture, and sometimes it's through an act of service. So if you're here and you've been thinking, man, I think I need to get more involved, I need to get more connected, today's your day to do that. The thing I want us to take from this, I think really is this, is that at any point in time, Jonah could have stopped the chaos by simply saying, God, I'm going to surrender to your will. God, I'm going to get in line with your program. God, I'm going to do what you've asked me to do, and I will do the thing that is hard, to go to the city of Nineveh, and I will take the message because that's what you've called me to. Sometimes we know what God's calling us to, and we're running from it, and other times we don't know because we just are so busy. So as we wrap up our time together, I've got 3 sort of reflective prayer questions I would love for us to pray through. Just a few moments of quiet. The first is this, is to say, God, what are you trying to say to me right now? That maybe I've been too busy to hear, but I'm going to stop in this moment, Lord, and you tell me, what are you trying to say to me? The next question is this, God, how am I running and hiding from you? God, how is it that I've been running from you? Show me that so that way I might have the opportunity to stop. And then finally, God, grant me the courage to listen and to respond. So let's just take a moment now. I'll kind of guide us through that a little bit, but let's just bow our heads and just ask God, speak to us. What have you been trying to say that we've been too busy or distracted or that we've been actively running from? God, speak to us right now in this moment. We're listening. God, we want to hear your voice, and we confess that we do run from you. Lord, would you show us right now, convict our hearts. What are the ways that we've been running from you, hiding from you, avoiding you, as you look to speak to us throughout the week? Now, Lord, for every person that's here, I pray that you would give them the courage to both listen, actively listen, and to respond. That even if you would call us to something difficult or hard or challenging, that you would give us the courage to do that, because we know that you always call us to our best. And Lord, we want to be obedient to that. We want to recover the goodness, not the greatness, God, but the goodness that you've put inside of us that would fill everything we do. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.